Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today we are going into the weird. We're discussing the world of Control, the video game that came out for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One about a year ago. Won a bunch of GOTY awards and thought it'd be a cool game to play and discuss since I missed out on it. But now I'm able to play modern games. So I thought, hey, better late than never. And joining me to discuss this game, as always, Pete Busby. Hello.
Hey, what's going on? This game is definitely science fiction adjacent, if not sci-fi proper. So it's fun to play, even more fun to discuss. I'm looking forward to it. For this week's fun fact, I have to give all credit to Gino Greco. He came up with this one, yeah. But it was such a good fact, I had to bite it. So this article is titled, again, all in the title, Research scientists at University of Richmond teach rats to drive. Results may inform future research strategies for mental health treatments. So back in October of 2019, a bunch of scientists at the University of Richmond, incredible school, taught rats to drive, because what else are you going to do? And they found that it helped reduce stress in the rats' brains. They really liked it. They enjoyed all this. And rats who lived in complex environments were more easily able to learn to drive. So complex, enriching environments increase neuroplasticity, is the way they put it. But put all that aside, most important bit, rats learn to drive.
Yes, I like that the rats first learned to drive for science and then for pleasure.
Yeah, it just turns out rats love to drive. And I mean, why wouldn't they? They also had Uber rats. So they put rats just in remote control cars. Rats did not enjoy that as much. They really want to be behind the wheel.
Rats did not like to be driven. They liked driving.
Nope.
When
yeah,
you
they
said
would cruise.
Uber, I was hoping that it would be like they would drive each other around. Is there any precedent for that?
No, there's nothing about, rats hailing ride sharing passes. Maybe that's like,
We'll
like I
get to
said,
that.
This is 2019. That could be the 2020 edition.
And for a second there, when you said there were Uber rats, I thought there were just bigger rats. These
The
rats.
ultimate rat.
This is the ultimate rat. They can drive two cars at once. I guess follow-up question, does it say if the rats ever committed vehicular homicide?
I think it was mostly driving through mazes.
Okay.
So I don't think they had the opportunity. But rats can be dicks, so maybe.
I know, I just felt like, first you teach them to drive, and then the next obvious thing is to use it to defeat your enemies.
Right. First you teach them to drive, then you teach them to kill.
Exactly. That other voice you heard is our other co-host, M. Palladino. Hello, M.
Hello. This was a game that was on my periphery for a while. I was into the SCP Foundation. I watched Warehouse 13 when it was on TV. So I had no idea that any of that was what I was going into when I started to play this game. I just thought you were a telepath. And I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah. Also, I'm now working on a screenplay where rats are going to take over cars and drive them into each other. Thank you for the concept.
Nice. I support it. I was thinking a live stage adaptation of The Fast and the Furious.
There you go.
Cast entirely with rats.
Oh, that would be great. You have the whole thing set up on a little track. Anyway.
The Rats and the Furious. Also joining us today, we have a special guest. Hello, Eric.
Hello. I thought you were going to say my name first.
Yes, Eric Kanius. Hello.
Hello.
I got scared that I'd mispronounce your last name again, so I backed off for a second,
Yeah.
but now I'm going to say it, and I think I said it right.
You did. You got real gun shy. And I have a connect the dots from rats to Control. So rat driving, you brought up rat danger. There, in Max Payne, there is a rat with a deagle you can find in a vent, and that rat with a deagle in Max Payne made by Remedy, who make Control. A to B to C, we're here.
Look, it just makes
Got
sense.
there. It's all linked.
You can find that picture of a rat with a deagle online.
What's a deagle?
The big gun.
Oh, okay. It's a big gun. Got it.
Desert Eagle. Excuse my CS talk, my Counter-Strike talk.
Okay.
I picked up on it.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay. That's fair enough. I am not a big Counter-Strike player, but a rat with a gun. What's more dangerous, rat with a gun or rat with a car?
Gun.
I feel like we've learned that rats know how to use cars, though.
Does the rat know how to use a gun is the question.
That rat
You
definitely
can
does.
learn. Apparently, you can teach him to drive. You can teach him to shoot.
Yes.
Now I just want people to have a gun rigged up to a button or something, and then they just teach a rat to shoot. Let's submit some ideas to the University of Richmond, see if they can answer some hard-hitting questions about rats. So Eric is the host of the Personal History of Video Games podcast, and also
Personal History of Games, yes.
Personal History of Games podcast, and also video producer for the League of Heels, the video game wrestling show that is at every PAX at this point.
Absolutely.
So you have our listeners, I think, are familiar with your work. I actually picked this game after consulting with you about potentially being on a show, so thank you for suggesting Control. It was a game that I thought was interesting, and then as soon as I played it, it was actively great. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you for taking the suggestion.
Of course. Awesome to get a chance to talk about it. So before we get into Control, housekeeping stuff. You can get in touch with the show at Deep Listens on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comments sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can send in emails. We don't have any emails today, but that's fine. And you can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, and then you can get in on our Discord and talk to the hosts of the show and give us bad suggestions about games to play. Sometimes they're good suggestions and we take them, but most of the time they're bad. You'd be amazed at how many people ask us to play like Shadow Hearts and stuff like that. But if you were to join the Discord, you could be on the Discord report.
The Discord report. This week on the Discord report, we talked about the Alien franchise in the TV and movies section a little bit. I rated the Alien franchises unprompted, which I will recount for you now. Alien 2, Alien 1, Prometheus, Alien vs. Predator, Covenant, 3, 4, Alien vs. Predator 2 is the worst one. Thank you for
Good
coming.
list. Good list.
Yep.
2 before 1, really?
Oh, most definitely.
1 is classic. It was tough. I think I moved it around a little bit, but 2 just brought it all together. What else did we do?
Some folks got into Final Fantasy IX,
Yep.
so that's cool.
Yeah, Jeff is working on it.
Yep, and we also started playing Opera Omnia, Dissidia, Opera. Fucking Final Fantasy names, man. It's just not. Just pick a name, please. Fewer subtitles. But you got into Opera Omnia too?
I downloaded it and I played for a few minutes. It drains my battery like nobody's business. So I can't play for very long, and then of course I forget about it. But I got Cloud, I got Lightning, I got Squall in my first 2 polls. So I feel like I'm doing pretty okay. I don't know what qualifies as good in this game.
From what I can tell so far, it seems that there are some weapons that are way better than all the other weapons, and you just go with whatever character has one of those weapons if you pulled one of them, and you'll be fine. Like, I got a good Sephiroth sword, and so I just roll through everything with Sephiroth.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I've got like 50 characters now. It's
Damn.
a lot.
I have like 10.
Yeah, it's a much better game than I expected it to be, or it has any right to be. It's way less exploitative. We'll eventually have a show on it. There's also people in the Discord. There's a lot of basketball talk because the NBA came back this week. Pete, how do you feel about your 76ers?
Grim as always, but cautiously optimistic, I guess.
That's fair. That's a good stance to have about the 76ers. Eric, as a Canadian representative, what do you have to say about the Toronto Raptors?
I don't watch basketball. Is Vince Carter still playing for them?
He retired last year.
Yeah, at the age of 42.
That's the last thing I remember of the Toronto Raptors, when he did that slam dunk where he put the ball under his leg.
Okay, so it hasn't devastated you that they're playing out of Tampa, Florida this year?
No, it's probably for the best.
Well, if they had a choice between playing in Toronto or Tampa, Florida, one of the hot spots of COVID in the U.S., you'd probably pick Toronto, but I think Canada was not going to let that happen, so.
Well, Toronto is Canada's hotspot as well, so.
Yeah, but there are degrees. Being the hotspot in Canada versus one of the hotspots in the U.S. is just orders of magnitude.
It's true.
They get to be in sunny Tampa, everyone's favorite. It's got to be the fourth or fifth best city in Florida, right?
Miami and Orlando are definitely in front of it.
Yeah. I guess it's better than Jacksonville, so it's probably the third best city in Florida. Gainesville's in Florida, right?
Yeah, but unless you're a Florida fan, who cares?
It's true. Yeah, probably the third best city in Florida. It's very weird seeing a Toronto floor when I watch games that are based out of Tampa, Florida. But this is 2020. Everything's a nightmare. And before we get to Control, last bit of housekeeping, it's time for my obsession of the week. Pete, I have a question for you.
Sure, lay it on me.
Do you like Christmas?
Honestly, not really. I'm more of a Thanksgiving guy.
It's fair. Do you like ghosts?
Yes, I very much like ghosts.
Do you like murder mysteries?
Yeah. Not like Scooby-Doo style, but I do like murder mysteries.
What if I told you there was a movie that combines all three of these interests that you have into one amazing romance plot?
I've never been more excited, Gino. Give me more.
There's the film called The Spirit of Christmas, made by Lifetime, that I watched on Christmas because I don't have full control of my life. And let me tell you, that movie sure is weird. It's a Lifetime movie where a lawyer who is trying to sell an aging hotel has to go to the hotel because when she tries to send an appraiser there, they're scared away by the ghost that lives in the house. Because you see, a man in the 1920s was murdered just outside of its grounds, and now, the 12 days before Christmas, he haunts the halls, and so she has to come to the house to get it appraised so that she can sell it, but he doesn't want her to because he's a ghost. There's
nothing about the cover or the promotional art that indicates any part of this.
No, super not. So yeah, there's a handsome ghost man who occupies this house, and they have to solve his murder. Maybe they fall in love. Maybe she makes out with that ghost. Who's to say? It's a Lifetime movie, so probably all of those things. But yeah,
What is the name of this movie?
The Spirit of Christmas.
Spirit works on multiple levels there. It's clever,
It is.
I get it.
It's also Canadian content. The main dude was a rum runner, a bootlegger in Massachusetts, and he would go get alcohol in Canada, in Montreal, and he'd come back.
So he's dangerous.
He is dangerous. Look at his haircut. Tell me that's not dangerous. So yeah, check that out. I think it was free on Amazon Prime. Don't pay for The Spirit of Christmas, but it is a fun watch, I will say. It's very weird. There's a lot of characters just interacting with a ghost and being very okay with it, I would say. They really want to have a horror moment once or twice in the film, and then they back off because they're a Lifetime movie. But it is a funny watch, if nothing else. And I recommend looking at the IMDb pages of most of the people in this film because almost all of them exclusively do rom-coms on straight-to-TV movies. So it's a real fun perusal. So without further ado, let's get to Control. M, can you describe what is Control? What is this game?
Control is a third-person shooter where you are playing as I don't know how old she is. I don't want to say a young woman. You are playing as Jesse, who is going to hold on, let me get the name of the
Federal
establishment.
Bureau of Control?
Federal Bureau of Control, the FBC, who have some connection to her brother, which we find out in the course of the game. It is not explained right off the bat. You get to the Federal Bureau of Control and find things are a little weird.
Just a little.
Just a bit odd. The building is kind of non-Euclidean. It kind of moves around at times. The people are kind of floating. Most of them, a bunch more of them, are possessed by something that you refer to as the hiss. You are being led around by a voice in your head, and also there is a gun that talks to you. Have I missed anything?
I mean, those are the basics.
Yeah, that's the very simple version.
As soon as you walk into the FBC, stuff is amiss almost immediately. Like, there are two paintings in the entryway, and both of them talk to you, kinda, the very beginning. You pick up a gun, and then you get portaled into another world to learn if you can use the gun. So Jesse is the director of the Federal Bureau of Control. Pete, how does the FBC pick who runs this bureau of the government?
Basically, what happens is the talking gun decides who gets to play Russian roulette with it. If you win, you're the director. If you lose, you're dead. Jesse won. Yay?
Yeah. So basically, it's an Excalibur situation. Whoever has the gun becomes the director. And that kind of goes into one of the main, I think, themes of this game is kind of Jungian ideals or Jungian archetypes are really big in this world. If you have the gun, you're in charge. Like, if you have the accoutrement of a certain role in this world, you just kind of are what you seem to be. And a lot of the objects, like Carl Jung comes up a whole lot in this game, a lot more than I expected in a third-person shooter. So when you first get in, we meet, well, first the previous director who has killed himself, it would seem, shot himself in the head. And we also meet a janitor named Ati. What did people make of the janitor when we first met him?
He's perfect. He's great. My note is Ati's performance is perfect. Also, his character is great. He's just like this mysterious janitor in this building. You assume the janitor knows, like, the idea of a janitor. They are the one that knows the most about the building, is the thought, and he very much does so. But it is a very peculiar character, and I enjoyed him quite a bit.
He's clearly untoward. Like, he's very interesting, a compelling character, but there is some unplumbed depth to him from the beginning.
Yeah, I think Jesse, when you first meet him, says he seems like a nice man, but also if there was an axe murderer in this building, it's probably him. So there's nice tension between him kind of muttering to himself. And from the first moment you talk to Ati, you notice that Jesse will talk to herself, or, you get a readout of her internal monologue, and Ati sometimes responds to whatever she's thinking. So, like, from the very first moment you meet Ati, you know something's up with him. And the further in you get, the more out of place he seems. But this is a game where almost everything is out of place, so it really works, I think. So when we first get in, the Federal Bureau, everything's gone bad. You pick up this gun, and your job early on is just to figure out what's going on in Central Executive, which is kind of the entranceway, and all the C-suite, like the director, some head scientists, all the major offices for the higher-ups are in this area. What did people think from this very early introduction, like this early area, seeing some of the intro enemies, getting some access to the upgrade system? Did anything jump out early on? The aesthetic?
There seems to be. I've noticed this especially with combat. I constantly thought of BioShock, basically gun in one hand, weird powers in the other hand. And I will say, it could just be me, but I didn't think it was a flattering comparison for Control necessarily. It just seemed a little more linear than BioShock's, weird slash gun dynamic.
Sure. Yeah, I think that they basically, instead of having all of these different powers that you're using that are really disparate in their effects, you basically have a few powers that are fleshed out more than I think any of the BioShock powers are. But I will say the shooting and the overall gunplay, I think, is a cut above what BioShock offered a decade ago. So it holds up a little bit better. What did you think?
In terms of the gunplay?
Yeah, in terms of the overall gameplay, like there's definitely less variety in the powers, but I think that just the basic gunplay is stronger.
Yeah, there's less variety, but the variety they do have is perhaps better thought out. Or like you said, better fleshed out, I guess.
Even as, like, there's a fairly limited number of enemies that you can fight against as you move on through the game. And you don't have that many weapons to choose from. And I was expecting there to be more powers than there were, but I think that the variety contained within those abilities and just mixing and matching the basic gameplay tools ended up feeling fulfilling through the entire runtime.
True. I will say the hiss is one of the dumber proper nouns we've encountered, though. And this game does have a lot of them.
I was not a fan of calling the enemy the hiss.
No.
It felt very like popcorn B-movie villain. It didn't feel like it fit the feeling they were going for.
You know what it reminded me, too? Have you guys ever heard of the hum?
Yeah.
No?
So the hum is like there's these whole populations of people like around the world who claim to hear this constant droning hum that once you notice it, it's really hard to tune out. And like there's these weird things where it gets louder indoors as opposed to outdoors. Sometimes they find things that are actually humming, but most of the time they don't. And a lot of the suspicion is that it's psychosomatic. But the hiss reminded me of that, so maybe, I don't know. They're probably not drawing a real-world parallel to the hum, but they could be.
Well, I mean, like the hiss and some of the proper nouns, I thought definitely it felt on point for Control's entire aesthetic, that the Federal Bureau of Control, for as much as they are trying to say they're in control, it's a bureau to control supernatural events and understand powers that are beyond human reckoning. And if there's one central theme that seems to follow through this bureau, it's that they give simple names and simple explanations to things that are well beyond their control in almost a way to make those things seem less threatening than they actually are. They give these cutesy names or single names to these properties that are actively killing almost everyone in the department, and everyone's talking about these different problems that are in the bureau. They basically downplay the threat of all of these horrible world-ending threats that are contained within the bureau. Because the hiss is the first one we encounter, but we encounter plenty more before the end of the game. And every single one of them, when first broached, seems like a really non-threatening thing. Like, oh, hiss, this is just a sound. Or the mold, which we hear about pretty early on. Oh, okay, it's mold. But once you get underneath the surface level name and description of what this thing is, you realize that, oh, these problems, these threats that are in the oldest house, which is the name of the FBC's building, once you actually start studying what these things are, it's amazing that everyone isn't dead all the time in the FBC. So yeah, the hiss is a pretty interesting enemy. Like, who wants to describe how the hiss works? Like, what is actually going on here? Eric, want to take a stab at articulating what is actually going on with the hiss?
I don't know. The hiss are they're kind of zombified people. They're former employees that are now taken over by this thing, and they attack you. And some of them are bigger than others, and some of them fly, and some of them bend backwards and come to you and explode.
Yeah.
That's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like they describe it as like a resonance. So it's like a chant or a
there's-
frequency.
There's a noise happening or some sort of sound or whatever happening in their head that changes them, and that you can see that affect other people, and people have the vests that fight that frequency to stop it from affecting them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting conceit. Like a sound that once you hear it, it worms its way into your brain, and then not only like changes your brain, but it changes your body too.
Just another weird thing I can reference. So the Branch Davidians,
No.
like David Koresh, he had this whole compound in Texas. They were a cult, the Branch Davidians. And supposedly there was a whole bunch of terrible stuff going on in there. So the government was going to break in and like liberate the cult members. They accidentally burned the place down. A bunch of people died. Not my point right now. My point is when the government was trying to do this, somebody called in. I forget who the guy was, but claimed he had a noise that would take over everybody's minds, right? Like say you just control their brains. And the government asked him like, oh, what happens if the noise doesn't work? He's like, oh, they would all go crazy and murder each other. So the idea of like a mind control noise, it's a fairly not common trope, but it is something that like it's been revisited in the past.
That's truly the darkest brown note I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's the whole story is absolutely insane, but this is just like a weird, even crazier tidbit of it.
Though that seems to be kind of on par for what Control's going for, because there's a lot of loosely referencing government, like real-world events or events from other Remedy games, and then just adding it into this overall narrative that's going on here at the FBC. Like there is a reference to an event that happened in Havana, Cuba, at a U.S. embassy a few years ago, where a bunch of people who were in the embassy started feeling sick and nauseous, and they thought that the embassy had been poisoned, but it hadn't been, and they eventually blamed all of the physical effects that were affecting the embassy staff on a sonic attack from outside of the embassy, some sort of sound weapon. It's referenced in this game, and they have an explanation for what happened in that embassy that differs slightly from the official accounts. Does someone want to explain what object, because they explain it with an object of power. What is an object of power, Em?
So an object of power is a mundane object that has gained certain supernatural properties. So the one that you encounter first is a floppy disk that can telepathically throw objects around. There are other ones such as the carousel horse, which lets you dash. And there are weirder ones like the telephone that you find as a plot point in order to communicate with the director. This is like a trans-dimensional phone, basically. There are a lot of instances where there are signs around the FBC that's like, don't take any objects home, because it could be just a regular old stapler or it could be a object of power. And if it gets out, then something bad might happen. And there are a lot of documents you can find where it's like, well, this idiot brought a rubber ducky back to his house, and then it was alive and following his kid around. It's referenced in one of the earliest notes you can find as like, if it's an archetypal object, like a representation of what a person might think of if they thought about like rubber ducky, basically. That is how things become objects of power.
Yeah, basically if something exists in the common consciousness, it is willed into power, basically. So if there's some, and they go out of their way to explicitly say, we've only found objects of power in objects that have existed in the culture for longer than like 10 or 20 years. So modern technology does not gain the same ability. In fact, there's a bunch of signs at the entrance to the FBC that says if you bring a cell phone or any modern appliance into the FBC, it might explode and kill you. So don't bring any real modern technology into this place. Yeah, so there's the objects of power, which have powers. They can impart those powers onto you. There's also altered items, which are similarly archetypal items, but they can't be controlled in any way. They can't give someone a power. They just have weird properties that need to be controlled. Otherwise, they'll kill
the fridge.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I didn't finish the fridge side quest. What happens with it?
Oh, Eric, want to explain what happens with the fridge?
Yeah, so the fridge is an altered item where you have to keep looking at it. If you look away, if there's no eye contact with it, it will do something bad. So you finally get into the room where the fridge is, but before you get in there, though, the guy who's watching it dies from the fridge, and then you go in and touch it, and then you get transported to the whatever the alternate dimension is, and you fight this huge monster on this. Yeah, you're basically throwing objects at this huge monster that comes in and starts shooting orbs of power at you, and then has like crab arms, not crab arms, has like pointy arms that try and attack you too. And then eventually you kill it, and then apparently that thing is like haunting the alternate reality or the alternate dimension. So if you go into the other altered items, I assume you fight that thing more. I stopped doing the side quest after that because there's too many. But that's what happens in the fridge.
No, so the fridge altered item, if you break eye contact with it, it teleports. It moves someplace else. So they basically... The Panopticon, it's one of the levels you get to later on in the game. I would say that everything in the Panopticon is one of like 3 or 4 different things that could destroy everything in the Bureau of Control. Like when you talk to the dude in the Panopticon, he's like, yeah, I mean, we lost some people, but it's the FBC. People die all the time. So yeah, the fridge, if you break eye contact with it, it'll teleport away. And in recent weeks, it has gotten murderous. It used to just be mischievous.
It's a murderous fridge.
Yeah, so the dude who was staring at it, he's been staring at it for days, because no one came to relieve him. And you can't blink. Like, you can't look away from the fridge or else it will teleport. So this guy's been unblinkingly staring at this fridge for maybe days, we don't really know. And when you come to relieve him of his duty, he gets eaten by the fridge. And there's just a blood stain where he was. You don't ever see him again. But yeah, when you report his death to his manager, he's like, "Oh man, sorry for James, but it's the FBC. Stuff happens." Yeah, so the altered items. Did anyone spend a lot of time in the Panopticon, like walking around seeing what the different altered items were in there? Because they're pretty cool, though they're not. They don't necessarily have powers when you go see them. It's just interesting to see, like, a swan boat behind glass, a mallet behind glass.
Yeah, I saw some of those, but this comes to a point where the gameplay and story intersect, where I was it was getting a bit much by that point, so I didn't really care to read all of the stuff that they were giving, and then to see all the stuff. I ran past the windows and saw the swan boat and stuff, but by that point, there was like a bunch of side missions piling up. So after you do the fridge, you then unlock the ability to go after like 6 more altered items. And it was a bit much, especially because I was like 2 missions away from the end of the game. I didn't even realize it. So it felt very backloaded with side missions, or just like across the board. So I didn't do any of them because I didn't feel the need to, because I was going through the story so quickly. But that was my experience with it.
Yeah. I was going to point that out too. Like, for the majority of the game, you have like at most 2 powers, because a lot of stuff is blocked off. Like, I was just running around with telepathy and the fast dodge until the Panopticon, and it felt like I was missing stuff. Like, I had quests that were like, go to the training room, and then I would go there and the door would be locked or something.
Yeah. You need to find a way into the training room that gets you the safe.
Yeah, is there like a back entrance? I don't know.
No, I ran into this exact same issue. I looked it up after I beat the game, because I was like, well, I want to see what the other powers are. And so all you have to do is throw objects. There's like 3 red blobs in that hallway, and you just throw objects at them to destroy it, and it breaks the door, which you don't do anywhere else in the game, so it never introduces this idea to you.
I see. Okay. Because I saw those around there, and I was like, okay, I hit 2 of them, and then I couldn't find a third one. So I was like, I guess I'll have to come back later. So I thought it wasn't related, which is interesting. So stuff like that, I was like, I guess there are other powers, and then as soon as you get to the Panopticon, it's like, all right, have the rest of them, dump. And then I just didn't go back because telepathy was working just fine.
Yeah, there are 3 missable powers. The safe, which gives you a shield. There's the horse, the carousel horse that gives you the dodge. You can miss that because it's just in a side room by the janitor's office. It's in the break room. And then there's I think it's an X-ray box, which gives you mind control powers that lets you mind control your enemies.
Yeah, that was the other one I had, and then I was like, I'll go back to this eventually, and then I never did.
I only used the shield like once or twice. It's not a huge deal if you miss it.
Yeah, I beat the game with the pistol and telekinesis, and I had the dodge because Gino told me where it was, or else I wouldn't have got that, and I would have beat it with the pistol and telekinesis, and that's it.
Yeah, I found the dodge by accident. I was just like, oh, there's a box over there, and then I fell in a hole, and then it transports you to the alternate dimension and gives you another power. I was like, oh, that's a weird way to do that, but okay. And then I had that and telekinesis, which I maxed out basically, and then I could just like throw one thing at a big boss and take it down to half health. So I was doing pretty okay.
Yeah, you don't need any of the other powers for certain.
Yeah.
Like most of them I didn't find it. The dodge I found useful for doing optional bosses just because they dealt so much damage that if you got hit at all, it was a problem. And the shield was kind of my oh shit thing. If I definitely couldn't dodge out of the way, I would just use the shield, and it was fine. You just can't attack when you've got the shield up, and I'm not the sort of player who's just going to stand there and tank damage for no good reason. But yeah, your sidearm is kind of interesting because it's not just a pistol. You can upgrade it and change it into a few different guns. What did people find to be their favorite configuration of the sidearm?
I'm a sucker for a sniper rifle, generally. Like whenever I have the option to use that in the game, I'm generally going for it. So I liked Pierce a lot, which is basically a 2-shot charge-up rifle. So it gave you hold it down for a little bit and it gave you a direct beam that could shoot through cover in certain cases and just do pretty solid damage on a single shot.
Yeah. And what were your guns of choice?
I actually pretty much just used the regular configuration. I forget what the name is even because I didn't change it that often. The grip, yeah. It was like grip and pierce were my 2. And I got the upgrades to get like spread and all that. And I was like, I don't really need it. The other one that's like makes it a revolver, that one was okay too. But I don't know. I was just throwing stuff at things. So the gun was basically to just finish off, like, if there's a little bit of health left. I didn't really have any problems, like...
Yeah, dealing with enemies. I mostly used the gun to soften people up so that I could mind control them.
Ah, gotcha.
My telekinesis dealt too much damage. They would die if I threw anything at them.
What's the benefit of mind control?
The enemies will fight for you, so they will deal damage to other enemies, but mostly it's because they will draw fire.
Gotcha.
So if you max out the mind control, I think you can control up to 4 people at a time, and you can gain the ability to mind control the big enemies too. So like any of those enemies that have like the rocket launchers or the grenade launchers or the guys who can pick up rocks and hurl them at you with telekinesis, like when you mind control those dudes, they usually can like take out an entire room for you, and you don't have to stand out and get damaged. Eric, what weapons were your go-tos?
Pistol, telekinesis, that's it. I would use the shotgun to get rid of the healing orbs that would show up. I would just run up to those and shoot them with the shotgun variant, but otherwise I would just use the pistol variant and like the base one and telekinesis, and that's it.
Yeah, you could definitely get through the game with just the grip. You don't need to mess around with anything. I use the scatter, which is the shotgun, and the pierce. I'm a big shotgun plus sniper rifle person. Up close and far away, nothing in the middle. Anything in the middle, I just I threw a piece of rubble at them and then they die. But this game isn't especially difficult outside of a handful of bosses, so you can pretty much play it however you want, which is fun. I think that it's a nice balance that this game strikes between challenge and story. Like, all that stuff is optional for the most part. Did anyone have trouble with story missions?
No, I mean, not really.
Not that I can remember. I kept getting stuck at the last where you're defeating the enemies that are shooting the satellite beams at the big orb. There was a sniper that just kept picking me off when I tried to reclimb back up, and it was a pain in the ass. But otherwise, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I had trouble with some of the optional bosses. I forget the guy's name. There's the first floaty enemy you run into.
Tomasi?
Tomasi, yeah. You can fight him again. And when I fought him a second time, he's a pain the second time you fight him. Because you're fighting him, and he also summons a bunch of random mooks midway through the exploding guys, and one of the invisible enemies. So you have to deal with him and some invisible enemy and exploding enemies that spawn near you and fly. It's a lot. It's a lot to try and deal with all at once. So that boss fight and a few other ones gave me trouble. But the story missions, I thought, for the most part, were pretty well balanced. So we've discussed like the altered items and the bureau itself. Which of the enemy types, like there's the hiss, the mold, the clog, did any of these weird enemies really jump out to you, stand out as like a cool design or an especially unsettling idea of how those things work?
The clog is totally gross. Like it's basically just like a big slug sort of deal that sprays gross hose liquid all over the place. Maybe one of the more disgusting things I saw in the whole game.
Yeah, it's not hard to fight, but it is like one of the first enemies that you're like, this thing's pretty gross and kind of weird. This place is weird. I like that one, honestly.
Yeah, Ati telling you, yeah, the clog, my old nemesis, and it's just like this horrible creature that's just lives inside of the pumps that go to the power source that powers the entire bureau. It's like, yeah, I sometimes have to clear this out, and it's just this gigantic monster. And no one cares about it. It's like no one except the janitor even references this horrible creature that seems to be capable of killing people. Whatever.
I think the security officer mentions it once. Like, there's a report he gets, and he's like, "Oh, I guess the clog is back. I'll better send someone down there." And then you, of course, are the one that he sends down. So people know that weird shit is going on. I guess the janitor has some way of dealing with it. Who knows how?
It's just like there's so much weird shit that like they don't have bandwidth for all of it.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, all right, like what's gonna like murder us? Okay, I'm dealing with this other thing that's gonna murder us first, and then we'll get to the island.
Yeah, like when you go down to the NSC, which is the power generator, all the people at the NSC are like, yeah, we can't leave to deal with the hiss right now because the NSC might melt down, and if it melts down, it's going to kill everyone. So we can't deal with these floating red creatures that are our former colleagues. We can't deal with that right now. We've got to make sure that this place doesn't melt down. Like every place you go to has a problem that is on the same level of apocalypse as the hiss, and they don't have the bandwidth to deal with the hiss yet. Did anyone figure out what the NSC was? Like, what's in there?
Isn't that where, like, they're storing something that's giving power to the whole place? I found a document that made it sound like it was some sort of demon, but I did not, like, get to go in there if that's a thing you can do. Do you know?
So it's heavily implied based on, I think it's the readout when you go to the NSC. There's a video you get from the previous director who talks about the director before him. And the director before him apparently amassed a bunch of power, like objects of power, absorbed some more energy from somewhere. And so he was apparently like the most terrifyingly powerful psychic user at the Bureau. And he was basically forced to step down because he was threatening to destroy the entire place. And Trench, the director before you, said, yeah, we had a solution for him, and thankfully he went willingly. Not that he really had a choice. Though I guess at the end of the day, it is the director's job, most basic job, to just keep the lights on. So it seems that the former director before Trench is locked in the NSC and is generating electricity for the entire building. It's just a person locked in there.
Okay.
Cool.
I mean, that's not like beyond the realm of possibility for, the Bureau of Control. While we're talking about weird stuff, there's also a part where you go down to the furnace and throw things into it. And there's an audio log where this scientist claims the furnace is alive, but it's not clear from the audio log if she's just insane. Do we ever find out if the furnace is alive?
I did not, though I feel like that's a recurring theme in Control. Someone talking about a thing, and then they may be insane, or the thing may be alive.
Yeah, I couldn't, because she says, like, oh, you can hear it, can't you? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. So I was just curious to find out.
The implication is that the furnace is asking her to bring food, and she's like, okay, I'll go see if I can find some volunteers. The implication being she threw a bunch of people in the furnace?
Yep, the furnace eats people, and she wanted to feed it.
Yep.
Great.
Also, there's no evidence that it was ever installed. So who knows where the furnace came from? Throw some radioactive waste into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, we learned that the oldest house, the place where the FBC is located, it changes shape constantly, and without someone exerting some sort of, like, using some weird pseudo technology to force some of the rooms to stay the way that they're supposed to be, the oldest house will just change when you're not in a room. And there are also thresholds. Eric, do you want to explain what a threshold is as best as you understand it?
I don't remember what that is. I'm starting to lose track of what things are.
The thresholds are
There's so
like
many nouns.
It's the quarry and the area with the mold. So it seems like there are dimensions that collide with our dimension in the oldest house, and there are just like this door that used to go to the bathroom, now it just goes to an otherworldly hellscape. Oops. And so the thresholds show up, they give access to some other dimension and other resources somewhere. They don't really even know where the hell the thresholds come from. But people are just constantly dealing with otherworldly nonsense because of them.
Yeah, that's the part where I started getting a little like shruggy shoulders, like hand wave it away because I don't really need to know about it because that's not where most of the game takes place, and then I moved on to the other parts.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, like, we only, I think, see 2 thresholds in this game. One of them's the quarry, which is kind of a cool location. It's an outdoor quarry with all this black rock everywhere. And you actually see a night sky, so you're outside even though you're inside of the building. And then there's a threshold just covered in mold that's really gross, which is where the mold comes from. So yeah, it's a bad place to work, I will say. It seems like the director is not a great boss. It seems like it's real thankless stuff.
Yeah, the dude at the Panopticon basically says that. He's like the middle manager in charge of it. Like, you ask him, like, why do you work here? And he's like, well, the pay's slightly better. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he worked at the post office, and then he's like, the pay is actually slightly better. And so I put in 10 years at the Panopticon, and now I'm in charge of it. Yeah, some people go missing, but if you don't, I mean, the dental's great.
Yeah, it's all very weirdly banal. Like the idea that you can just sort of get used to this weirdness as part of your work environment.
That's one of the best parts, is that it feels very real to them, because this is what reality would look like, is people just dealing with it, and everyone's jaded from this job and not even like upset about it. They're just kind of like, whatever, it's a job. And that makes it more interesting than everyone like being mind blown at all this new stuff, because it's not new to them.
Everybody was just sprinting around screaming the entire game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
But to the earlier point of this building being ever changing, did anyone else get lost a lot? I found myself lost all the time. My notes go from no hand holding is fun to getting lost so much, but also part of the exploration, to getting lost a lot, period. And that's all I wrote.
I had the map open basically the entire. If I wasn't fighting somebody, the map was open.
Yeah, my problem with the map is not necessarily that it's not exhaustive, it's that you need to understand that it's semi-topographical. Like the colors on some of the floor layouts indicate whether they are above or below other floors. And I just wish that, I don't know, maybe there were layers to the map instead of having a single map, or maybe the map could change depending on what floor you're on. But sometimes I just was not sure, okay, do I need to go up to go to this place or down to go to this place? It says that these two rooms are adjacent to each other, but hell if I know how to get there.
The one point where I ran into that was when I had to go to the quarry, and there's an elevator that should lead you down there. It will take you down there, and then you don't have a key card to get in. So that's the back entrance. I ran around for like hours trying to find the entrance that I was supposed to take, to the point where I was just like kind of miffed at the fact that it was taking so long. And then when I finally asked on the Discord, ZP was like, just go through this hallway. And then I was like, God damn it. Of course it's just like the one place I haven't looked, which was coincidentally directly off of the training room that I couldn't get into. So I had no reason to go back there. Yeah, like it's kind of Metroidvania-ish in that way, where some things you just can't get into because it needs like level 5 access or whatever, and then you need to come back around whenever you get that, which I did very rarely unless it was like directly in front of me. Did you do a lot of backtracking as far as that went?
I did after I finished the game, but I didn't do it in the moment, hardly ever.
I don't know if there's any benefit to actually like, oh, I'm going to go back around, check all the level 5 doors now that I have clearance.
They usually will give you... Most of those rooms are just rooms with 2 treasure chests in them, and like one of the treasure chests will give you really good stuff. But I had no problems getting through the game with my bad upgrades, so it didn't feel like you had to do it.
I had some level 4 or 5, whatever the prime upgrades are, and that was really good, and that got me through the majority of the game. I was using rares for a while, and then at some point, I guess the difficulty increased, and so they gave me some better stuff, but I didn't need to go like down any weird hallways or anything.
Yeah, by the end of the game, enemies and bosses will just drop prime upgrades by themselves. So there was no need to just double back or do anything like that. Though I think that does bring up something in the game's systems. You can upgrade your weapons using a bunch of bits that enemies drop. You can also create new upgrades. And then there's also a subsystem of, I guess I would say, ongoing missions that the game will throw at you that, I don't know. Did anyone mess with any of those? There's some that seem to be randomly generated that you need to deal with every 20 minutes. And then there's also some almost like achievement level stuff that you can get assigned. That's like, kill 10 enemies with this gun. Kill 5 of this kind of enemy. And they'll give you an upgrade for accomplishing those tasks.
I mostly just did them by accident. Like, if I happen to kill 10 enemies with headshots or whatever, great. Bonus points. But I never like set out to do any of them. I mean, because you can get through the game, like we said, with just the primary gun and some upgraded telekinesis if you need to.
Yeah, it's interesting. They seem to have built into this game a bunch of replayability features, but many of them are not fun.
Yeah, the timer missions that pop up every now and then look really important when they appear on the screen. And then if you go to the place where you're supposed to do them and you die once, the mission goes away. So basically, I try to do it like I think 3 or 4 times, and then after that I was like, it was like a mosquito. I was like, get out of the way. I don't think I ever actually cleared one, just because it's ridiculous how much stuff they throw at you. But probably now that I had all my stuff upgraded, I could go and do them without much problem. But what's the benefit of finishing those?
You get some more ability points. Like, they give you
something minor
stuff. Yeah. It's like upgrade items, ability points, things that you don't need to finish the game at all.
Yeah, I did one of those. They do make them seem important, and you do one, and then that's it. Nothing happens, and then nothing happens if you don't do them, so you just continue not doing them. Yeah, it's like they were trying to build this big open world things to make the world seem more busy and happening, but you can ignore everything and just do the story and like mainline through it, and I was at the end before I thought I was at the end. So it's kind of strange that way.
Yeah, totally. I did the first one that I got because it reads like a regular mission. You know, like one of the story-centric missions. And then as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, these are just random, enemy tranches that you do not need to care about one bit. The game won't penalize you for it. So one of the other things that jumps out when you're playing Control is kind of the remedy-ness of everything, which by that I mean there's a bunch of videos of live action, and there's a weird show that is in-universe. Does anyone want to talk about Dr. Darling's videos or the Threshold Kids?
The Threshold Kids are so fucking weird.
Oh my god, it's so creepy. Like, they're these little puppets, and the whole point of, at least the one that I watched, I don't know if there are more, the whole point of the video is like, look kids, like, sometimes your parents are going to go missing, but like, it's part of the job, and you need to do it to help America. Threshold Kids.
Yeah. The Threshold Kids, basically, there's a document you can find where Darling is like, we need a way to teach children about these objects because they are the children of people who work in the Bureau. And so the best way I can think of is to make a super creepy puppet show. And we're going to distribute this everywhere. How many of the videos are there?
There are 6.
Okay, I saw
There's 6 Threshold Kids videos?
2, 3?
Yeah. I found 5 of them, I think. So, yeah, Pete, I think you found the first one, which is like, I miss my mom. I miss my dad.
Pretty much.
And then they're just like, get over it. Yeah, there's a video on your parents going missing. There's a video on altered items where they find a TV and they're like, hey, that TV wasn't here before. It's like, I want to watch Space Captain Hee Haw. Let's turn it on. And one of the girls is like, no. It might be an altered item. We shouldn't touch it. It's like, well, can I poke it with a stick? They poke it with a stick. They're like, oh, I guess it's fine. And then he goes to turn it on and they notice that it was never plugged in. And the TV starts levitating, and they freak out. End of video. Smash cut to black. There's a video on secrets, and that it's very important to not tell any secrets from the Bureau to anyone outside the Bureau when you're outside on a day visit. And they quiz them on, like, questions. Like, hey, is a Yeti a real thing? If you're talking to someone outside of the Bureau. And they're like, no, they're not real. And they keep quizzing them, and then one of the kids gets a question wrong, and he's like, well, Uncle Dr. Bones is warning you. If you get another question wrong, you're going to be like this girl. She's not allowed to leave anymore.
Speaking of Uncle Dr. Bones, you want to tell people who that is?
Oh, yeah. If you didn't see all the Threshold Kids videos, there's a third character. There's the 2 creepy kids, but then there's Uncle Dr. Bones, who's he's a skeleton wearing a baby doll face as a mask, but only on, like, the side of his face. It's kind of like a hat almost. And he seems to be the adult figure to these kids. And every time he's on screen, it's terrible. It's terrifying.
Absolutely fucking horrifying. The worst thing in this game with a lot of bad things.
Yeah, there's an episode of the Threshold Kids where I think Meg is her name, the girl puppet, does badly on a clairvoyance test, and he's like, "Hey Meg, what's wrong? You can tell Uncle Dr. Bones, Uncle Mr. Bones, what's wrong?" She's
Oh,
like, "Well, I did."
he doesn't have his doctorate yet.
No, he's Uncle Mr. Bones.
Oh, okay.
My bad.
Well, one day.
So he's like, "Just go ahead and tell Uncle Mr. Bones what's wrong." And then she's like, "Look, I did bad on this test." And he's like, "It's okay, Meg. You know, some people's brains can talk to other brains. Some people's brains can throw a baseball. Some people's brains can set people on fire. We just need to find out what's going on in your brain, Meg. And if so it's okay if you didn't do well on this test. Maybe your brain can throw a baseball or make your friends go blind." She's like, "Well,
why is he so horrifying?" Sorry, I just looked up a picture of him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and she tries to talk to him when he's explaining about brains, and he screams at her, "No interruptions," which is horrifying. And then at the end, he's like, "Look, and if you have the best brains, you get to sit in the big chair." She's like, "What if I don't want to sit in the big chair?" "Everyone wants to sit in the big chair." It's, Threshold Kids are great. Eric, as someone who makes videos, what do you think about the Threshold Kids?
They're great. I just watched half of one in the game because I was trying to beat it, but I just watched one now. They're fun. I love them. They seem delightful.
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be like a sign of the Bureau's derangement that like obviously things are going wrong if like somehow Threshold Kids made it through the committee process?
I mean, I think it is. I think it's supposed to be like, look, these people are so desensitized to the madness of the world they inhabit that this is what they thought a kids' TV show should be. There's an episode on the house shifting and what to do if the house starts shifting around you. It's great. It's a great show. And it's, the work of Dr. Darling, which, I mean, you see a lot of him, and he seems okay, but all of his videos are just off enough to make you realize, oh, this guy's unhinged too.
Yeah, he seems like a very nice man. Like when he showed up, he was very pleasant. He was buying everybody coffee, bringing in donuts. And like over time, he's just been bent into some weird, strange shape. Like one of the most horrifying videos to me, I don't know if anybody else found this, but there's a video of just B-roll. It just says extra footage, and you're just watching his like assistants like sort of creepily doing things and eyeing the camera warily. Very strange.
Go ahead, Em.
There's a document you can find from the perspective of one of those side characters in the background, and they're like, "Is it weird that we just kind of have to stand there in the back and not talk and not do anything while he's talking?" The other guy's like, "That is kind of strange now that you point it out." After I found that, I did not trust those videos at all. It's very strange.
They say, I mean, I guess it's better than working. Just standing in the background of these videos being talked at. But yeah, he never lets anyone else speak. He wants to be the central focus of every video. And many of the videos explain a concept in the world in some way, but then he'll like look off camera, or like it'll cut to a take that he didn't like, and it's weird. And then you eventually stumble across videos of him becoming progressively unhinged and progressively undressed, which is weird towards the end.
It's worth noting that all of the videos of Darling are live action.
Yes.
As opposed to an animated character, which I hear is very Remedy. I think they often do this sort of found footage kind of thing in their games.
They'll do live action, but they've also, like, the Remedy, what do they call that? The stamp of a Remedy game is having an in-game a TV show that is fictional to us, but in the game it is real to that world. And it is unrelated, usually completely unrelated to the happenings. Like Max Payne had Address Unknown, and then Alan Wake had one, and then they had a whole game that was one. Yeah, so that's the Remedy stamp.
Yeah, so Threshold Kids would be that in here, though the Alan Wake and the Alan Wake show are both canonical in the world of Control. They actually explain the events of Alan Wake via an object of power, and they reference the show from Alan Wake as like an example of ways that they can get the FBC's like knowledge of reality into the public consciousness, just in case the government ever has to reveal that some of this stuff is true. So like they can use weird TV shows to just kind of float the idea so that people aren't completely horrified when they learn the truth.
That's fun. That's good writing.
Yeah, I think that the writing in this game is solid throughout. I generally do not read additional literature included in a game, even if it's collectible. But I think that the writing in this one is good enough, and the construct of the world just kind of works to the level that I was fascinated by their extra fiction. It's not just explaining things that I don't care about. It's like, hey, what's going on with this mallet? Why is it behind glass? Oh, if you touch this mallet, it gives you cancer. Oh, no, it gives you leprosy. That's what the mallet does. Don't touch the mallet.
This seems to be a moment, too, for what's sort of been taken to be called weird fiction or the new weird. So it's basically exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of sci-fi adjacent, but like stuff's very strange. It's all very weird. Like another big example is Annihilation. Very good book series and then a movie with Natalie Portman. It's good, but very weird. And it makes me think of Adorno. He wrote this book about astrology. And his whole point was like, look, the world's a scary place where like the regular person has very little control over what happens. Like we're all sort of ruled by these multinational conglomerates and like huge trade deals and economic policies and things. So it's comforting to think that like the world is ruled by the stars because it gives that lack of control a certain dignity. And I feel like the weird's having a moment for the same reason, that like none of us are really in contact with the things that are ruling our lives. So it's more comforting to think that like, oh, really, this is, some sort of extraterrestrial board of paranormal entities, as opposed to like, oh, like Mitch McConnell was angry at the insurance industry, so like now we all, have throat cancer or something. You know what I mean?
Yep. Easier to ascribe something to a supernatural cause rather than the just rote incompetence or malice of ordinary people.
Yeah, or even the idea that like no one's in control, that like all these factors come together between like, oh, what are all these companies doing versus like, oh, here's this other thing going on in China, and like it all smashes together to create these things no one's really in control of. It's an unsettling thought, much more unsettling than like, oh, there's a giant interdimensional centipede that's just in charge of everything.
Yeah, and I think if there's one takeaway from the game Control, it's that the Bureau of Control is not in control. They're even in this world that they've created where there are extra dimensional beings, no one's in charge. No one actually knows what the hell they're doing. Like everyone, the fact that you pick up this gun and then you're in charge of everything. At first I was like, oh, maybe they're just calling me director, because it's just a title, like it's the person who holds the gun. But like actually you have the authority to give people commands, and you've been in the building for less than 10 minutes. And you're just in charge.
And once again, everybody just accepts the gun's judgment. Like nobody's like, maybe we shouldn't let a gun decide everything for us. They're like, oh, gun said it, cool. Like, all right, director.
Yeah, the lady who's studying the mold does not like it that you can give her orders. She's like, well, I just have a PhD in cryptozoology, but I guess you picked up a gun, so tell me what you want me to do.
That lady is saucy.
King Arthur. Yeah. So I guess coming around towards kind of closing thoughts on Control, what did we think? I mean, we've been in spoiler territory for a while now, but I think more explicit spoilers. Like, what did you think of Ordinary? Like, what the origin story of Jessie and Dylan, her brother?
It's a dumb name.
Yeah. Well, this game's not exactly subtle. Like the actual slide projector and the source of the hiss, because I found that the foundational narrative there, what happened in Ordinary and kind of piecing together what happened to Jessie when she was a kid, was one of the more interesting plot lines that we get in this entire game. And I wish that we got to see the slide projector. Though it feels like the oldest house is kind of the slide projector in microcosm. But reading the story of what her and her brother and all of them dealt with in Ordinary felt really cool to me. Like it was a style of sci-fi that I'm not used to. And could you describe what the heck happened there as best you can? Or I can do it if you don't remember it too well.
I was watching at this point, so I didn't pick up the extra documentation. So you'll probably do a better job than I could.
Okay, sure. So what happened is in Ordinary, Dylan and Jesse found a slide projector in the dump. The slide projector had 8 slides. Each slide, when you put it into the slide projector, opens a gateway to another dimension. And you can go through it and, be there. There was one that was of a house, and it's just a slide that takes you to an old, creepy, abandoned house in another dimension. There was one that was a meadow that made you sleepy and made you basically trip balls when you were in there. There was one dimension that was occupied by something known as the Unmother, which fed a bunch of kids milk that turned them into monsters. And then there was one slide called the Hand that took you to a dimension with 5 pillars, where Jessie met this being that kind of gave her supernatural powers. And so, like, the first day they find the projector, they start messing around with it. One of the kids who drinks milk from the Unmother, like, gets turned and then murders his math teacher. And then the parents take the projector away. One of the kids wishes that all their parents would just go away so that they could have fun with their projector. The next day, every adult in Ordinary is gone. The day after that, there's some sort of conflict between Jesse, Dylan, and the kids who were messed up by weird milk. And it gets resolved by the being that... I forget what is the being that gives Jesse her powers' name?
Polaris.
Polaris.
North Star.
Yeah, they meet Polaris. Polaris gives her and Dylan the power to turn off the slide projector. This causes like some of their friends to be left behind in other dimensions. Then they burn all of the slides except for the slide that goes to Polaris's world. And then the FBC shows up. They confiscate the projector. They take Dylan in as a prime candidate for being the next director. They just basically kidnap him, and then Jesse somehow escapes. So that's kind of what's going on. But I just really enjoyed it. It felt very Stranger Things, having this slide projector.
There's a tradition in science fiction of like bringing something back through the void. Like you go through and like you think you made. It's very sort of Alien, while we're on the subject of Alien. That like somehow this thing gets inside you or like follows you back from wherever it is you made contact with it. The other one I think of a lot is what's that movie where they go to the hell dimension?
Event Horizon.
It's a lot like Event Horizon too, right? Like you go through this portal and you think you made it back, but something followed along with you.
Yeah, Event Horizon was the movie that this game made me think of the most. Because the idea is that this ship takes a jump to light speed, but actually they end up in hell. And when they come back, it's an abandoned ship, but because the ship has gone to hell, it is now changed. The ship is now a being where it wasn't before. And that's kind of the entire idea of the altered items and the objects of power. They were simple things, and now they're something more. Though different explanation for why. So any closing thoughts on Control? Anything we didn't cover that people want to talk about?
The astral maze part.
Oh, yeah, the best part of the game.
Yeah. That part was very cool.
The Matchbox Maze. Eric, what is the Matchbox Maze? Or the Ashtray Maze. Sorry, Ashtray.
Astral maze, wasn't it?
It's an ashtray.
Yeah, because a cigarette lets you get through it.
What?
Yeah, there's not.
Until you get the cassette
I
deck.
thought it was the cassette.
It was the cassette player that gets you
But it
through
was
it.
originally a cigarette.
Oh.
And then they lost the cigarette, so you needed the cassette deck.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an ashtray object of power that let the previous director create the maze.
Oh. Yeah, it's a maze that like changes as you walk through it. Doors will close and open. Those animations are very cool. So I found that maze like pretty early on and ran around it for a bunch and then eventually left. And then as part of the story, you get Ati's headset that he's wearing, and you listen to some metal music while running through this maze, shooting a bunch of enemies that die real quick, or you throw shit at them, and then you make your way through the maze, and it's very cool.
That metal, that song, and the song is just very on theme. It's just heavy metal, just going, take control.
I liked too the dimension of infinite clocks. So you end up in
that part was fun.
Yeah, we're just clocks. Like you start with like one clock, then there are a few more clocks. Then you get to a room where it's just entirely clocks, and you're just walking on them and wading through this sea of just grandfather clocks.
Is that one of the Panopticon missions?
That's when you meet like the medic and his buddy, and you have to like go in because they've been trying to like capture this anchor that's an object of power, and they go into the clock dimension. I don't think it's in the Panopticon.
Oh, no, I did not go to the clock
before
dimension.
That. You meet these people, and then you have to go through the motel, which we also didn't talk about. And then you end up in this place where these clocks are being spawned, and then when you fight the monster, or it's an anchor that's an object of power, or an altered item, I guess, because it doesn't give you anything. You fight this anchor, and it turns into this big thing that shoots more clocks at you. And I did not beat that fight.
Yeah, I didn't even encounter that.
Yeah, I didn't beat the anchor either. But there's so many clocks, and like you meet people talking about it one time, like guards, I think, for the Moth Woman. Not Moth Woman.
Moss Woman?
Yes, thank you. Mold Woman.
Mold Woman.
They're like talking about the dimension. They're like, yeah, it really creeps me out. And the guy's like, is it all the clocks? He's like, yeah, it's all the clocks.
No, I found, I did not find the dimension with clocks. I did find the mirror. I don't know if anyone found the mirror altered item.
Is that the one where you fight yourself?
Yeah, there's a version of yourself in there. It's S's J.
Jesse spelled backwards.
Jesse spelled backwards.
Classic.
But yeah, the mirror dimension's pretty horrifying because when you're in there, every time you talk, you speak backwards, and the mirror does not actually reflect the world accurately. Like there are things that are deliberately removed when you look in the mirror out of the reflection. So people are like speculating, is it the world as the mirror wishes it was?
What a stupid idea.
Well, I mean, the puzzle to get to the mirror is the mirror's reflection basically gives you the combination to unlock the room to the mirror. So it wishes that the door was unlocked. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. There's also a room, I think it's in the executive suite, that's just completely covered in Post-it notes.
Yes, that's true.
You don't do anything. You don't get anything. It's just cool that it's all covered in Post-its.
Did anyone find any of the hidden rooms? Or the destructible walls?
What?
I found one or two by accident.
What are those?
Destructible walls or hidden rooms?
Both.
No. Yeah, so destructible walls, if you see any walls with a painting of a like broken wall on it, that wall's destructible. So you can just shoot it or blow it up, use, telekinesis, anything will blow a hole in the wall, and there's usually just treasure in there. But yeah, it'll be just a painting on the wall of a black and white, like broken hole in a wall. And then there are hidden rooms, like rooms that you can always see them for the most part, but either getting to them is difficult or unintuitive, or the game just doesn't lead you there. The first time I encountered one was in the turntable room when you're trying to get into the ordinary model. There's kind of a room in there. It's just like some windows in one of the hallways, and it looked like it was an office, and I saw a treasure chest in there, but there was no door or anything to get in there, and there was no connection to the rest of the world. So I just like picked up an object and hurled it through the window. And then as soon as I stepped in, they were like, hidden room. When you go to one of the hidden locations, you get an ability point as well. for the trouble. But yeah, they're pretty cool. I found one, if you go to the very top of the NSC, once you have Levitate, you can get up there. And if you do, there's a video of what's going on inside of the NSC and I think a description of one of the altered items. The surfboard. The surfboard's pretty cool. It just gives people confidence if they touch it. That's its ability.
I mean, of course, that's what they do in real life.
Exactly. But the confidence was too much for people, so the government needed to confiscate the surfboard. Okay, so yeah, I mean, that Matchbox maze is super cool. There's a bunch of otherworldly locations. Like the first time you meet the TV and it warps the world around you, like that's super awesome. This game is a technical marvel. I don't think we've said that explicitly, but like when you fight an enemy and they explode into rainbows when you kill them and stuff like that.
This game is extremely cool, and then like using your melee, which is just like a force push to blow up everything in front of you. Like all the destruction was real neat to see, except for you're gonna walk through the windows after you blew them up, but whatever. You could at least like blow desks away, and that stuff is all very cool and didn't slow down the game at all.
There were some windows you just need to break them a lot in most cases to get through windows. More than I thought I would need to. But I found that some of the hidden locations, that was the trick. Just break them way more.
This question might be way too big for this point at the podcast. I have no idea at this point. But can anyone succinctly explain to me what ray tracing is? Because apparently, like, that's pretty important in Control.
I could, yes.
Okay.
Ray tracing is basically how they calculate bullet paths, stuff like that. So when you, it's going to get a little technical.
Yay.
When you do a ray trace, you are firing a beam in a straight line in a direction, and then it is getting a read on what it hits. So in the case of like, if you're firing a gun, which is the easiest example, it's going to put a straight line from where the barrel of the gun is. And then if it hits a wall, it'll read like, I have hit a wall, I'm going to leave a bullet mark. That's like the most basic use of ray tracing. Why do you ask?
Because apparently when I was reading the Wikipedia page, it said Control was one of the earliest games to, I'll get the actual quote so I don't screw it up. But I was trying to figure out what ray tracing was.
Well, it's related to the lighting. So with the new video cards, they're tracing every ray from a light bulb, because how light works is in rays.
Okay.
So one bulb would shoot out 1 billion of rays. And so how lighting works in games previously is they kind of make up how the lights work and how they reflect off things around it. But the idea is to like computerly generate a bulb of light and all the rays coming off of it and how those rays interact with every object around it to reflect correctly, like you'd see in real life.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, the quote was just,
wild.
Control was one of the first games released to take advantage of real-time ray tracing built into the hardware of newer video cards.
Exactly. So it's just new lighting, and it looks way better and way more natural, but it's very intensive on the video card.
Gotcha. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, I was curious what it was.
Yeah, you can imagine that before, if there was just a source, maybe it had some light, and maybe there was like a pre-rendered shadow that would be cast in a direction depending on where the light was. That's a significantly easier thing to do than actually have the light represented in the form of rays for every single light source. Wow, I did not realize that they were using that for lighting. Like in shooting, it makes a lot of sense because usually you don't want to actually render a bullet and then have to actually move it through space. Just knowing the path of the bullet is enough.
When you do it with shooting, you do it once. But if you're doing it with lighting, you're doing it like 1 million times each frame. So that's intense. I don't know how anything can handle that, but I guess they figured it out.
Isn't the future grand?
Yeah, right? We made it.
We did it. We did it, everybody.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in Control. Don't go to the oldest house. I think it seems like a bad place to work. I like that the government is very incompetent in Control. They seem like they're in control, but they are not. Game holds up. I would definitely recommend it. Like the sound's pretty good too. The music, the instances where they have unique music, that all holds up. Any other closing thoughts on Control?
Oh, the guy that plays Trench is the guy, is Sam Lake, who played the original, whose face was used for the original Max Payne and voice. That's why I brought up Sam Lake before, because he's like one of the heads of Remedy, and they used his voice for Trench, and yes, he was also Max Payne, so I just heard Max Payne talking, and they did similar VO styling, so it was very much Max Payne. If you like that, you'll like this.
Good voice. Solid choice.
Definitely. If you want a hard-boiled director type, that is certainly a good get. All right. Well, with that, we close the book on Control. And just for the record, Control will count for our Game of the Year podcast. It is in some of these different categories. It's going to be coming up in a lot of our genre categories, it would seem, and some representation in Best Character. So look forward to that. I had the last pick, which means now I believe, Pete, it is your turn once again to pick what game to play next.
Yeah, we're back around to me. So with this pick, there's some games on sale right now as part of Steam's winter sale. So I was going to try to pick one of those, and I thought I would pick a cyberpunk experience that actually works. Shade thrown. So I'm going to pick Cloudpunk for my game next time.
I've never heard of this.
I will read the description. A neo-noir story set in a rain-drenched cyberpunk metropolis. It's your first night on the job, working for the Cloudpunk delivery service. 2 rules. Don't miss a delivery, and don't ask what's in the package.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's on sale.
It sounds like the Transporter, but in a cyberpunk world.
Basically, yeah. Or the start of... Oh, shit. I forgot the title of the book now. Damn it. Give me a second. Keep talking.
Crank. No, that's not it.
Crank 2.
Oh, man. Crank 2. What a good movie.
Crank 1 is better.
It is, but they're both solid.
Yes, but yeah, Crank was incredible. I haven't thought about the Transporter in a while, though. I remember seeing that in theaters. It was okay. Jason Statham's pretty good.
What's Jason Statham up to?
Or the beginning of Snow Crash. There we go.
Excellent.
Jason Statham's in Fast and Furious.
That's what he's doing now? That's what he's up to?
Yeah, making money.
Unless they're still making Expendables movies. Then he's in those, too.
That, too.
I don't think they're still making Expendables movies, and that's for the best. All right. Well, thank you, Pete.
Yep, this was honestly a very interesting game. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you. This was a game that I've been looking at, but didn't think I would get a chance to play, and then it was on sale, so bonus.
And thank you, Eric. And is there anywhere where people can find you or follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Eric Kanius, Kanius, or go to ericandkelby.com. That's my Let's Play / where the podcast is hosted. Or go to dowelike.com. That's where the podcast my wife and I host. Oh, yeah. Play Control. It's fun. If you like shooty games, it's a very good one. Very well made.
Yep. And thank you, listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Send us emails. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Get in on the Discord, join the community. And with that, till next time, peace!